The senator from Minnesota.
Madam President, I ask that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
And ask to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Madam President, I rise today to talk about the House's effort last month to repeal the Federal Communication Commission's net neutrality rules. Net neutrality is the very simple idea that all content and applications on the Internet should be treated the same, regardless of who owns the content or the website. This is not a radical concept, in large part because it is what you and I see and experience every time we use the Internet. But the House wants to change all of that and effectively turn control of the Internet over to a handful of very powerful corporations. I want to take a few moments today to tell you why I think the House's vote was a mistake and why I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that we don't make the same mistake here in the Senate. But before I get into those details, I think it's important to take a step back and talk about the Internet that we have today. Let's be clear. The Internet we have today exists because it is free and open, because we have always had net neutrality throughout the entire existence of the Internet. I have to give credit to my opponents on this issue who have done a masterful job of manipulating the American public into believing that net neutrality is something that it is not. Net neutrality is not about a government takeover of the Internet. It is simply the idea that all content, whether it's a web page, an email, or a movie you're downloading, can load onto your computer at home at the same speed regardless of who owns or controls that content. This is not a radical idea. It is what you experience today when you use the Internet. Right now, if you buy Rihanna's latest song from iTunes, it downloads as quickly as a song from your friend who has started a band in his or her garage. If you send an email to your mother, it arrives in her inbox just as quickly as the email she gets from President Obama. And if you start a website for your small business, your customers are able to access your website and place orders for your products just as quickly as if they are buying from a multinational corporation. I like to talk about YouTube's early days as a startup because it is such a powerful example of why net neutrality is so critical and how this simple concept helped create a billion-dollar company practically overnight. YouTube's early headquarters were situated in a tiny space above a pizzeria and Japanese restaurant in San Francisco, California. But just 6 months after the site was activated, over 100 million people were using YouTube to watch videos every day. And less than 2 years after its start, YouTube sold its business to Google for $1.6 billion. Isn't that incredible? Well, I am here to tell you that it wouldn't have been possible without net neutrality. At the same time, at that time, Google had a competing product, Google Videos, which was a standard at the time but was widely seen as inferior. If Google had been able to pay Comcast or Verizon or any of the others large amounts of money to make its website faster than YouTube's, YouTube would still be floundering over that pizzeria, or most likely it would have ceased to exist at all. Fortunately, Google couldn't pay for priority access, and the rest is history. What I am saying here is that we take and have taken this equality that YouTube enjoyed, this basic fairness or neutrality, for granted. in large part because that's how the Internet has always been. Unfortunately, many members of the House have twisted this concept and are misleading the American public into believing that the government wants to take over the Internet, and that is simply not true. One member of the House actually got up on the House floor and said that, quote, over the last 10 years, over $500 billion, billion with a B, of private investment has been made to develop broadband throughout the country. This is without any kind of taxpayer money. He's wrong on that point, but let's put that aside for now. He went on to say, continuing on, this is private sector money being put into the marketplace to go and create jobs, to go and create the kinds of technologies that allow you to view and use all kinds of apps that are available on these kinds of devices. That was done without net neutrality. They would tell you that they need net neutrality in order to have this innovation. Of course, they failed to point out that net neutrality was not in place when all this innovation happened, unquote. Yes, it was. It was in place. That's the whole point. All of this innovation occurred while net neutrality was in place. We are not trying to change anything. We are keeping the Internet the way it has been during this explosion in innovation. Now, my fervent hope is that this member of Congress was just horribly, egregiously misinformed. Because not only is his statement untrue, it is the opposite of true. It is 180 degrees opposite of the truth. Please, everyone understand this. I beg you. Net neutrality has been in place since the beginning of the Internet. From the very beginning, during all of that explosive growth, the Internet operated with an understanding that network providers must treat all content the same and must interconnect the pipes they have to customers' homes with the pipes that are owned by other operators. This was a fundamental design principle that was established by academics, engineers, and computer scientists who designed the earliest protocols for Internet traffic. The fact is that the Internet started and grew because everyone realized that they needed to cooperate and work together for customers to be able to have access to the content they wanted. They realized that that's what consumers needed to create demand for Internet service, and they realized that that's what would lead to the most innovation on the Internet. The FCC isn't trying to change that. It has no interest in derailing free enterprise. Quite the contrary. The FCC is interested in protecting the innovators and the entrepreneurs that have made the Internet what it is today. Because of the Internet, you no longer need a major studio to like your film or a television show that you produce in order to have people see it. You no longer need a major record deal to start distributing your music. And you no longer need a high school diploma or fancy degree to launch a small business and sell your products online. We don't want to change that. We want to preserve that. The FCC's only goal here is to make sure that the Internet we know and love does not become corrupted and altered by a small number of large corporations controlling the last free and open distribution channel we have in this country. As telecom companies have grown larger and fewer and started owning not just the pipes but also the content, their incentives have changed. They're starting to care more about giving their own content a competitive advantage rather than promoting innovation and competition on the Internet. The fight for net neutrality isn't about changing the Internet. It's about creating a few rules of the road to keep it open and free, to keep it the same, and to continue the innovation and growth that is such a creator of jobs and wealth. The fight for net neutrality is about making sure large corporations aren't allowed to put toll booths on the information superhighway. This fight is about making sure that the Internet stays just the way it is, free, open, equal, available to everyone regardless of how much they can pay to get their content on. There was a time not so long ago when net neutrality was a bipartisan issue that wasn't incredibly controversial. Just 3 years ago, Mike Huckabee was talking about the need to keep the Internet a level playing field. And in 2006, 11 House Republicans voted in favor of net neutrality on the floor. Rarely do you have the Gun Owners of America and the Christian Coalition joining with MoveOn.org and the ACLU to advocate for the same policy of non-discrimination on the Internet. But they all agree on net neutrality, and so do the Catholic bishops. And later today, I will receive 87,000 letters opposing the House's effort to undo the FCC's open Internet rules. These letters came from Americans across the U.S., including 2,000 letters from Minnesotans who are worried about this. They want the Internet to stay the way it is, open and free from corporate control. I am confident as more Americans realize what is at stake here, that we will hear from more and more constituents who will ask us to protect them from corporate takeover of the Internet. What is most striking about about this issue, which seems to have gotten lost in the rhetoric that my opponents use, is that experts from Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Goldman Sachs, Citibank, Wells Fargo, and Raymond James have all stated that they don't believe the FCC's current rules will hurt investment. Citibank has called the rule balanced, and Goldman Sachs said it is a framework with a lot of wiggle room, and that is a light touch by the FCC. But despite this broad and diverse coalition of businesses and interest groups, we are still here arguing about something that should have been settled long ago. Why is that? Well, a lot has changed in the last couple of years. Control of the Internet has been placed in the hands of a small number of players. Media consolidation has raised the stakes for certain mega conglomerates, which have a lot more to gain in a world without net neutrality. I was last here on the Senate floor talking to you about net neutrality back in December when the NBC-Comcast merger had not yet been approved by the FCC or the Department of Justice. At the time, I warned that this would be the first in a cascade of media consolidation deals, and wouldn't you know it, just 2 months later, AT&T announced another record-breaking $39 billion deal with T-Mobile. This merger, which Wall Street applauded, is almost assuredly going to be a raw deal for consumers. If approved, we will have a duopoly in wireless telecommunications in this country. 80% of the wireless space will be controlled by just two companies, AT&T and Verizon. Now, I look forward to the hearing next week in the Antitrust Subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee so we can further explore the details of this deal. But I think it's fair to say that I am very skeptical because it's likely to raise prices and it's certain to reduce choice for consumers. I have always been skeptical of media consolidation because at the end of the day, when corporations have tremendous amounts of power to control prices and cripple competitors to benefit their bottom line, everyone loses. But the impact of media consolidation in telecommunications is about more than just consumer prices. We have always known that large corporations have the power to influence elections. And then last year, the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United took a situation that was already terrible and made it worse, much worse. Now AT&T, Verizon, Time Warner, and Comcast can spend unlimited amounts of money to support the candidates or campaigns that they care the most about or try to weaken or kill net neutrality. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that when a single corporation, in this case AT&T, spends $15.3 million in a single year to influence Congress and has 93 full-time lobbyists on its roster, Congress just might churn out legislation that AT&T likes. How can American consumers stuck with rising cable, internet, and cell phone bills ever be expected to counter that type of lobbying power? And with media consolidation, we have seen a shift in the net neutrality talking points of members of Congress who are also receiving large checks from Verizon, AT&T, and Comcast. Yet the irony here is that the open Internet rules passed by the FCC earlier this year are actually pretty weak and riddled with loopholes. Actually, I think that is the wiggle room that Goldman Sachs was referring to. These rules are, let's be honest, a mediocre compromise drafted to appease a handful of powerful Internet service providers. I wasn't happy with these rules and thought the FCC should have done more, particularly to cover wireless Internet networks, but it didn't. And it didn't in part because the Commission wanted companies like AT&T to get on board with its plan, and AT&T did that more or less. AT&T didn't think the rules were ideal, but it acknowledged that the framework is a compromise that gives its investors certainty. But that hasn't changed how the House is framing its rhetoric about this rule, which is one of the reasons I think the vote last month was a political stunt designed to misinform Americans and appease a small number of very vocal critics. This isn't what most Americans, entrepreneurs, or small businesses want. They and I want a world where the future Twitters, eBays, and Amazons of the world can grow and thrive without interference from big mega conglomerates. Finally, regardless of how you feel about the FCC's rules, I think we can all agree that this issue requires thoughtful debate and discussion, not the kind of uninformed rhetoric I quoted earlier from the House debate. By forcing an up or down vote through the Congressional Review Act, House leadership short-circuited the normal legislative process and ignored the FCC's work on this issue. The FCC spent months examining this topic and meeting with tons of stakeholders and Internet companies. It carefully considered and compromised on a range of issues that I frankly wish they hadn't budged on. To claim that the FCC engaged in a power grab is unfair and far, far from the truth. The White House has stated that the President will veto this resolution, but I will be working hard in the coming months to make sure that we have enough votes to stop this before it reaches the President's desk. We are at a pivotal moment. If we don't act to preserve the FCC's open Internet rules, the Internet as we know it today may cease to exist. I hope my colleagues will recognize this and will join with me in voting down the House's resolution of disapproval. Thank you, Madam President, and I yield the floor noting the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. further proceedings in the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that Samantha Wessels, Kelly Mormon, and Carolyn Traeger of my staff be granted full privileges for the duration of today's proceedings.
Without objection.
Madam President, everyone in this body agrees that we must take aggressive action to reduce the deficit. But we have to do it right. Frankly, the best way to bring down the deficit is to help 15 million unemployed Americans get good middle-class jobs again. Those hardworking Americans would be delighted to be on the tax rolls and to be taxpayers once again. But regrettably, the Tea Party budget passed by the House Republicans last month takes us in the opposite direction. It would weaken our economy and destroy jobs. I have spoken previously on the Senate floor about the grave flaws in the Republican budget. But beyond the misguided priorities in that budget, I object to its premise. The premise of the Tea Party Republican budget coming over from the House, the premise is that America is poor and broke, and we can no longer afford the investments that make possible a strong middle class and world-class economy. Indeed, some House Republicans take the radical view that government has no business investing in the middle class, period. Madam President, I emphatically reject the defeatist premise of this Republican budget. The United States of America is a wealthy nation, the wealthiest nation in world history. The problem is how that wealth has been shared or not shared among the American people, with income inequality that is the highest among developed countries. Let me repeat that. Right now, income inequality in America is the highest among developed countries. So the problem is how our wealth has been invested or misinvested, with trillions of dollars squandered by money manipulators on Wall Street or funneled to those at the top through tax cuts. Unfortunately, the Tea Party budget, authored by Congressman Ryan, would make these problems far worse. It lavishes yet more tax cuts on corporations and the wealthy, even as it slashes investments that undergird the middle class in this country, everything from education funding to Medicare and Medicaid. Let me state the obvious. If working people and the middle class are going to take a hit in tough times, it shouldn't be to take a hit to pay for tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires. Let's look at some of the particulars in this so-called deficit reduction plan of the House Republicans. For starters, never before have I heard of a deficit reduction plan that begins by demanding trillions of dollars in new tax cuts, largely for corporations and the wealthy. In addition to allowing the very wealthy to keep all of the benefits of the Bush-era tax cuts and to keep them permanently, the Republican budget would cut the top tax rate from 35% down to 25%. Let's again state the obvious. This doesn't reduce the deficit. It digs the deficit hole much deeper. Next, the Republican budget dismantles Medicare and Medicaid and lays the groundwork for deep cuts to Social Security, changes that will devastate the economic security of the middle class in this country. The Republican budget says that we cannot cut one additional dime from the Pentagon budget, because, I guess to them, there's no waste in the Pentagon. There's no unnecessary weapons systems, no troops based in Japan or Europe or elsewhere that could be brought home. Meanwhile, this Tea Party Republican budget slashes federal investments in everything from education to infrastructure to law enforcement back to the levels of the 1920s. Again, let me repeat that. It slashes federal investments in everything from education to infrastructure to law enforcement back to the levels of the 1920s. It also repeals Wall Street reform that we passed here, as well as the consumer protections in the Affordable Care Act, including the ban on denying coverage for pre-existing conditions. What's that got to do with the deficit? Their budget cuts funding for food safety, workplace safety, environmental protection, gutting common sense regulation of corporate America. It tells Wall Street bankers and speculators, health insurance companies, credit card companies, and mortgage lenders, you are free to go back to the reckless, abusive practices of the past. We'll just trust you to do what's right for the American people. To appreciate just how extreme and ideological this budget is, look more closely at its blueprint for replacing Medicare with a voucher system. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimates that by 2030, future seniors would have to pay two-thirds of the cost of their private health insurance. Their out-of-pocket costs would average in excess of $12,000 per person per year, more than double the current cost to seniors. Yet this would pay for private plans that would provide only half of current Medicare coverage. How many seniors can afford to pay $12,000 annually out of pocket for health insurance that only gives them half of the coverage they have right now for Medicare? And good luck finding affordable coverage if you're a 70-year-old with a pre-existing condition such as heart disease. Good luck fighting endless battles with your private health insurance company over that one. Madam President, does this Tea Party Republican budget reflect our values and priorities as Americans? Is this the kind of country we want to live in, the kind of country we want to pass on to our children? Of course not. Americans don't want or expect a handout, but they rightfully expect a government that lends a helping hand, not one that stands in their way, not one that destroys the essence of the middle class. The American people want a government that helps them to achieve retirement security, a government that makes sure that when we put money away for retirement, it's going to be there when we retire. The American people want to maintain strong investments in education and infrastructure. To reduce deficits, the American people want shared sacrifice, including an increase in revenues from those who can most afford it. They want an end to taxpayer subsidies to oil and gas companies, and they want to cut Pentagon spending. Yet the Republican budget does exactly the opposite in every single respect. Madam President, make no mistake, this Tea Party Republican budget puts us on a course of disinvestment, drift, and decline. Disinvestment, drift, and decline. This budget reeks of pessimism and gloom and doom. As I said, its defeatist premise is that the United States is poor and broke, and we can no longer afford a strong and secure middle class. We can no longer afford to prepare our young or care for our elderly. Yet, bizarrely, the Republicans insist that we can absolutely afford another enormous tax cut for millionaires and billionaires. Madam President, I totally reject this premise. I reject this defeatist Ryan budget, the premise that America is poor and broke. Here is the truth. The United States is recovering from the largest economic downturn since the Great Depression, and from the damage caused by very unwise budget decisions made over the last decade. And we're growing wealthier by the day. Our entrepreneurial economy, our technology, universities, the arts are the envy of the world. Americans are still the best educated and most productive people on earth. Most importantly, Americans continue to be an optimistic, can-do people. We have faced national trauma, including depressions and wars and natural disasters many times before, and we have always rebounded stronger and better than ever. We can overcome our current challenges without sacrificing our great middle class and without abandoning our seniors or people with disabilities and the less fortunate among us. Madam President, there's one important point of agreement on both sides of the aisle here in the Senate. We agree that the current budget deficits are unacceptable. We must bring these deficits under control. However, deficits are by no means our only urgent economic challenge. An even greater challenge is our fragile economy and the jobs crisis. And addressing this successfully will help reduce the deficit. Now, the unofficial unemployment rate is 8.8%, but the real unemployment rate, including people who are underemployed, who have dropped out of the job market in frustration and are no longer looking, is a staggering 16%. Meanwhile, our middle class is under siege. Our middle class is being dismantled as fast as big corporations can shift our manufacturing jobs overseas. People are losing their savings, their health care, losing their pensions, in many cases losing even their homes. With good reason, American people feel they are losing the American dream for themselves and for their children. That's why we cannot look at the deficit reduction challenge in isolation. We cannot just take a slash-and-burn approach to the budget. Smart countries do not just turn a chainsaw on themselves. Instead of this Tea Party Republican budget, which is being sold through fear and fatalism, we need a budget that reflects hopes and the aspirations of the American people. We need a budget that brings deficits under control in a way that allows us to continue investments that boost competitiveness, create jobs, and strengthen the middle class. And I would add this. We need a deficit reduction plan that actually attacks the sources of our current deficits. Now, what are those sources? Well, a remarkable article on the front page of Sunday's May 1st Washington Post by Lori Montgomery documented clearly how the huge budget surpluses of the Clinton years were turned into the $1 trillion budget deficit that President George W. Bush passed on to President Obama. As the article states, quote, voices of caution were swept aside. Political leaders chose to cut taxes, jack up spending, and for the first time in U.S. history, wage two wars solely with borrowed funds, end quote. The article cites a new analysis by the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, which determined that, quote, routine increases in defense and domestic spending account for only about 15% of the financial deterioration. The biggest culprit, by far, has been an erosion of tax revenue triggered largely by 2 recessions and multiple rounds of tax cuts. The article notes that federal tax collections now stand at their lowest level as a percentage of the economy in 60 years. In 60 years. Madam President, of legislation passed since 2001, when George W. Bush became president, about half of the negative impact on deficits came from reductions in revenue, and nearly a quarter came from increases in defense spending. One half came from reductions in revenue. I'm talking about now what's the sources? What are the sources of the deficit hole we're in? Well, if in 2001 we had huge surpluses, and CBO said if we maintain the same budget policies that by 2010 we have paid off the entire national debt. If that was 2001 and 10 years later in 2011 we have a $1.4 trillion deficit, what happened? What decisions were made in those 10 years that put us in that hole? As I said, the article by Lori Montgomery in the Washington Post clearly points out, and the Congressional Budget Office clearly points out, half of it, half of the hole we're in came from reductions in revenue. A quarter came from increases in defense spending, and a quarter from everything else. As the CBO analysis makes clear, we do not just have a spending problem, we have a revenue problem. The main source of our current deficit problem is not the modest increase in domestic spending beyond the one-time spending in the Recovery Act, which is rapidly coming to an end. The principal source of our deficits are the deep tax cuts and the surging Pentagon budget, 75% of our current problems. Yet, now the Tea Party Republican budget calls for trillions of dollars in yet more new tax cuts, largely for those at the top. It refuses to cut Pentagon spending in any significant way. It places almost the entire burden of deficit reduction on programs that support the middle class, seniors, people with disabilities, and those of low income. So Americans are rightfully asking some common sense questions. If a principal source of our deficit problem has been deep tax cuts, largely benefiting those at the top, shouldn't a big part of our deficit reduction plan include allowing those unaffordable tax cuts to expire? And if ongoing domestic spending increases are only a minor source of our deficit problem, why does this Republican budget take a slash-and-burn approach to these programs, which are so important to the middle class and to working Americans? The answer, of course, is that the Tea Party Republican budget is not principally a deficit reduction plan. It is an ideological manifesto that encompasses the entire Tea Party wish list, everything from more tax breaks for the rich to dismantling Medicare and Medicaid. Madam President, I have a simple test for judging any budget plan. What does that plan do to give hope and opportunity to middle-class Americans who have been hardest hit by the economic downturn? To speak in terms specific to my state of Iowa, what does it do for Webster City? Webster City is a community like thousands of others across the United States. It's a town where middle-class families work hard, play by the rules, sacrifice for their children. But it's also a town where our decent middle-class way of life is threatened. Recently in Webster City, Iowa, the Electrolux plant that has been the town's economic engine for over 80 years closed its doors. Production was moved to Juarez, Mexico. In the final round of layoffs in March, 500 Iowans lost their well-paying middle-class jobs. This most recent factory closing comes on the heels of 222 plant closings just in Iowa last year, destroying nearly 12,000 well-paying middle-class jobs. As we all know, each of these plant closures reverberated on Main Street, with many local stores and restaurants falling on hard times or going out of business themselves. Let's be clear. The wrong kind of budget plan, one that indiscriminately slashes funding for education and job training, infrastructure and research, will deepen the plight of Webster City and similar communities across America. Indeed, by accelerating the erosion of the middle class in this country, such a plan will make our fiscal situation even worse. There can be no sustainable economic recovery in the United States without the recovery of the middle class. There can be no sustainable solution to our budget challenges without a strong middle class, a middle class that's getting its fair share of rising national income. As I said earlier, we are growing wealthier by the day in America. We are the wealthiest country in world history, and we're growing wealthier by the day. But what we want to make sure is that the middle class will get its fair share of that rising national income. So again, I think the test of a budget plan is this. Will it strengthen the middle class in America? Will it require shared sacrifice with a promise of shared prosperity in the long run? Mr. President, Madam President, I've applied this test to the Tea Party Republican budget, and it comes up woefully short. This Tea Party Republican budget cuts the top tax rate for millionaires and billionaires from 35% down to 25%. How will that help laid-off workers in Webster City? The Republican budget dismantles Medicare, replacing it with an absurdly inadequate voucher system. Will that strengthen the retirement security of seniors in Webster City? This budget of the Republican Tea Party people cuts Medicaid. Will that improve the lives of seniors and people with disabilities who depend on Medicaid to pay for nursing home care and home health care assistance? The Tea Party Republican budget slashes funding for Pell Grants. Will that improve the prospect for kids in Webster City who want to go to college but whose parents are now unemployed and without resources? The Tea Party Republican budget makes draconian cuts to funding for everything from food safety to law enforcement to environmental protection. How will that improve the quality of life in Webster City and communities across America? Madam President, we know the answer to these questions. The bottom line is that the Republican budget offers more pain and no gain to the people of Webster City. Instead of increasing economic opportunity, it sends a message of surrender and defeat. Indeed, let's speak the plain truth. With this Tea Party budget, Republicans have taken their class warfare to a new level. They have launched an unprecedented assault on middle-class and working Americans. Their message to struggling folks in Webster City and communities like it across America is brutally clear. Tough luck. I've got mine. You're on your own. This Republican Tea Party budget would drive down our standard of living, shred the economic safety net, reduce access to health care and higher education, and do grave damage to our public schools' ability to prepare our kids for the jobs of the future. We can and must do better. I have come to the floor today to propose an alternative approach to the federal budget, a balanced approach that will discipline the federal budget and bring deficits under control while continuing to make critical investments in a stronger America. And best of all, we know this approach can work because it is consciously modeled on the successful budget policies of the 1990s. Under President Clinton's leadership, Congress passed a bold economic plan that combined tough-minded spending cuts with smart investments and, yes, revenue increases. This created large budget surpluses, put us on a track to completely eliminate the national debt within a decade. It created a brief era of shared prosperity for the middle class, with 22 million new jobs and 116 consecutive months of economic expansion, the longest in American history. So I say to the people across America, we can do this again. The key to renewing America and restoring our economy is to revitalize the middle class. This means reducing deficits while continuing to invest in education, innovation, and infrastructure, boosting American competitiveness. And it means restoring a level playing field with fair taxation, an empowered workforce, and a strong ladder of opportunity to give every American access to the middle class. We have the resources, both financial and human, to do these things. I repeat what I said earlier. The central falsehood in the Tea Party Republican budget is its assumption that America is poor and broke. Its assumption that we can no longer afford to invest in a prosperous and secure middle class. Again, I say emphatically, we are not poor and we're not broke. We have the highest per capita income of any major country. As I said earlier, the problem is how our wealth is distributed, how it's managed, and how it's been invested, or should I say misinvested. Income inequality in the United States has reached levels not seen since immediately before the Great Depression. Middle-class Americans are working harder than ever, but they're falling behind. Real average incomes haven't gone up since 1979, more than 3 decades ago. Let me repeat that. Average real incomes haven't gone up since 1979, more than 3 decades ago. In fact, over the last decade, the average income of working Americans has actually declined, while those in the top 10% of income earners and wealth in America, their incomes and their wealth has soared to new levels. Vast wealth, because of tax breaks and other government preferences, has flowed to millionaires and money manipulators who pay a tax rate that is lower than that paid by their chauffeurs and their secretaries. In 2007, the top 25 hedge fund managers took home an average income of $892 million. Yes, you heard that right. $892 million each, average income for 1 year. Over the last decade, the average income of the top 1% in America increased by an average of more than $250,000 a year. Again, let me repeat. In the top 1% of income earners in America, their income increased by an average of more than $250,000 a year for 10 years. I ask, who in their right mind believes that these people need another giant tax cut? Now, Madam President, people don't hate the rich. To the contrary, most Americans aspire to do well and to achieve financial independence. That's a big part of the American dream. But Americans do resent it when the wealthy and powerful manipulate the political system to reap huge advantages at the expense of working people and the middle class. Ordinary people think the game is rigged and unfair. And you know what? They're right. Yet this Tea Party Republican budget says to middle-class Americans again, hey, tough luck, I've got mine, you're on your own. Your retirement security is expendable. Your access to health care and college is expendable. Your desire for quality public schools is expendable. Your quest for a modernized transportation system is expendable. All of these things, according to the Republican budget, are expendable in order to create a tax code even more favorable to the rich and the powerful and the privileged. Madam President, this is deeply wrong. The middle class is the backbone of this country, and it's time our leaders showed the backbone to defend it. We need an alternative, a budget that invests in education and opportunity for all Americans, a budget that invests in the retirement security of the middle class, and yes, a budget that does not abandon the less fortunate among us, including seniors and people with disabilities. As we saw in the 1990s, we can do these things at the same time that we are bringing deficits under control. This will require smart, prudent reductions in spending, and it will require reform of the tax code to make it fairer and more equitable, a tax code that asks more from those at the top whose incomes have skyrocketed in recent decades. Let me speak first about spending cuts. I hope I have set an example with my own Appropriations Subcommittee, Subcommittee on Labor, Health, Human Services, and Education of the Appropriations Committee. The fiscal year 2011 spending bill that was enacted last month cuts spending in these areas by almost $6 billion and eliminates dozens of individual programs. I also serve on the Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense. Of course, I believe we can make major spending cuts without harming our national security. I agree with Secretary Gates, who has urged us to terminate the additional C-17 cargo planes and a new amphibious fighting vehicle. I would also save $12 billion by terminating the V-22 Osprey, which even Dick Cheney leveled a turkey and tried to cancel. I would also save around $80 billion over the next decade by reducing the number of active duty U.S. personnel stationed in Europe and Japan. Most importantly, it's time to save hundreds of billions of dollars by speeding up the return of our troops from Iraq and Afghanistan. It costs an estimated $1 million a year to deploy and support each soldier deployed in those wars. That is an extravagance we can do without. We can also make cuts close to home. I represent a farm state, and I have a strong record of supporting a true farm income safety net. However, in this time of strong, the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, is still paying out nearly $5 billion a year in direct payments to farmers, having no relationship to farm income or commodity prices or to what they're even planting. No question, we can save some money here while still making sure farmers have a good, solid income safety net protection system. We also must find additional deficit reduction in the area of health care. Once again, the Tea Party Republican budget flunks the test. It doesn't reduce spending on health care. It just shifts costs. It shifts the cost to seniors and others by making them pay most of the bills themselves. By contrast, the new health reform law actually cuts health care costs. Again, according to CBO, it reduces the deficit by hundreds of billions in the first decade and by more than $1 trillion. The health reform bill cuts the deficit by more than $1 trillion in the second decade while preserving and strengthening Medicare, not just dumping it on the backs of seniors. It does so by rewarding health care providers for the quality of care, not the quantity. It does so by placing a sharp new emphasis on wellness and prevention, keeping people out of the hospital in the first place. And it does so by creating an independent commission of doctors, nurses, medical experts, and consumers to examine patient data and recommend the best ways to reduce wasteful spending and ineffective procedures while preserving the quality of care. We can and must build on the health care savings in the Affordable Care Act. But my friends on the other side of the aisle want to repeal the Health Reform Act. But they don't say where they're going to get the money to make up the $1 trillion hole it will blow in the budget in the next decade. Madam President, the enormously successful deficit reduction campaign of the 1990s insisted on a balanced approach, spending cuts and revenue increases. Revenue increases were concentrated on the most affluent Americans, those who could most easily afford it, and who benefited the most from the strong economy and the stock market that followed. This must be our template as we raise necessary revenues to reduce future deficits. By all means, we must allow the Bush-era tax breaks for the wealthiest 10% of Americans to expire immediately. To put it bluntly, they don't need it, and we can't afford it. The fact is, high-income Americans did extremely well in the 1990s under the higher rates of the Clinton years, and they will continue to do very well in the future, while contributing their fair share to bringing deficits under control. I also strongly agree with President Obama's proposal to limit itemized deductions for the wealthiest 2% of Americans, a reform that would reduce the deficit by $320 billion over 10 years. We need to end the outrageous gimmicks in our tax code. Just one example, the, quote, carried interest, close quotes, loophole that allows many hedge fund managers to pay taxes at just a 15% rate on part of their bonuses, a far lower rate than middle-class Americans pay. As I said earlier, in one recent year, the top 25 hedge fund managers took home an average income of $892 million a year each. Let's tax this income the same way we tax the income of teachers and truck drivers. In addition, I strongly favor a modest speculation tax on certain types of financial transactions. A 0.25% tax, that's 1/4% tax, on each stock transaction, and a similar tax on options, futures, and swap transactions. In order to minimize the impact on ordinary American investors, this would exclude transactions in tax-benefited pension accounts such as 401ks and IRAs and defined benefit plans. Now, some might say, well, this sounds kind of a pie in the sky. Well, Mr. President, Great Britain currently levies a tax on stock transactions that's twice as high as what I'm proposing. Twice as high as what I'm proposing. And there's no question that Wall Street can easily bear this modest tax. John Bogle, the legendary founder of the Vanguard Mutual Fund Group, has long advocated such a speculation tax, a transaction tax, in order to, and I quote, slow the rampant speculation that has created such havoc in our financial markets. We also should be working to eliminate the tax provisions which promote the shifting of jobs to other countries. The President's budget proposes the elimination of over $100 billion in international tax breaks in this area. Mr. President, a prudent but aggressive mix of spending reductions and tax increases, combined with stronger economic growth and an end to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, will bring federal deficits under control. This will restore the fiscal discipline that was squandered in the years after President Clinton left office. Best of all, this restored fiscal foundation will allow us to continue making critical investments in transportation and infrastructure, education and energy, investments that will put Americans back to work, strengthen our global competitiveness, and prepare our workforce for the future. And make no mistake, we have no time to waste. While the United States has been distracted and weakened by foolish wars and speculative bubbles, our competitors have been charging ahead. We have lost major ground to China and to other rapidly growing economies, including Brazil and South Korea. We are playing catch-up, and the stakes are enormous. Across America, roads are crumbling, bridges are collapsing. Our formerly world-class interstate highway system is increasingly overwhelmed. Mass transit systems, including Washington's once proud metro system, have fallen into disrepair. We have a backlog of $1 trillion in school construction and modernization. In infrastructure, we currently invest less than 1/3 of what Western Europe does as a percentage of GDP. China has tripled its investment in education and is building hundreds of new colleges and universities at a time that we're slashing school budgets and laying off teachers. The Tea Party Republican budget makes this investment gap far worse. It proposes to cut funding for transportation by 25% and for education by 25%. And in future years would cut those investments even more deeply. Congressman Ryan has the audacity to tell us this is, quote, a path to prosperity. Common sense tells us it is a bridge to nowhere. Mr. President, these statistics are not abstractions. Investments in education, infrastructure, and innovation directly translate into more and better jobs, higher incomes, stronger economic growth. That's why we need to get America moving again. For starters, we need a massive new commitment to infrastructure expansion and modernization, truly a Marshall Plan for America. The first step is to adopt a solid 6-year surface transportation reauthorization bill that will allow us to modernize our transportation system. We also need robust new investments in clean, renewable, domestically produced energy. This will lower our energy costs in the long term and will reduce our dependence on some of the most unstable countries in the world. Early in the 20th century, we provided the emerging oil industry with subsidies to accelerate its growth. Today, we must provide similar policies to accelerate America's transition to a clean energy economy, including long-term tax credits for renewable energy generation and for infrastructure investments for biofuels, as well as smart grid technologies to enable broader renewable energy use. The goal should be 25% of our energy from renewable resources by 2025. In the field of education, we need major new investments. This begins with federal support for universal preschool education to ensure that every child is ready to learn and succeed in school. It means an ambitious reauthorization of the elementary and secondary education bill that closes the gap between world-class schools in affluent suburbs and struggling schools in poor urban and rural communities. It means providing resources to ensure that the goal of graduating students who are college and career ready applies equally to students with disabilities. Mr. President, in closing, in my remarks today, I have offered not just an alternative approach to bringing deficits under control, but an alternative vision of the role of the federal government. Going back to the 1930s, the American people have supported and strengthened an unwritten social contract. That social contract says that we will prepare our young and care for our elderly. That social contract says that if you work hard and play by the rules, you'll be able to rise to the middle class or even beyond. That social contract says that a cardinal role of government is to provide a ladder of opportunity so that every American can realistically aspire to the American dream. Mr. President, in one fell swoop, this Tea Party Republican budget rips up that social contract. It replaces it with a winner-take-all philosophy, again, that tells struggling, aspiring people and communities across America, I've got mine, you're on your own. Mr. President, as I said at the outset, the Republican budget is premised on the idea that America is poor and broke, that our best days are behind us, that we have no choice but to slash investment required in order to keep our middle class strong. I totally disagree. America remains a tremendously wealthy and resourceful nation. We are an optimistic, forward-looking people. We're a purposeful and can-do people. And we expect our government to be on our side, the side of the middle class. We expect it to be an instrument of national greatness and purpose, allowing us to come together to achieve the big things that we cannot achieve as individuals. Things like building an interstate highway system, mapping the human genome, and one day discovering a cure for cancer. Through our government, we come together to provide a ladder of opportunity to give every citizen a shot at the American dream. A ladder of opportunity that includes quality public schools and universities, Pell Grants, the GI Bill, job training. Through our government, we come together to ensure that our citizens have a secure retirement with guaranteed access to health care, and to ensure that the less fortunate among us are not abandoned to the shadows of life. Mr. President, I am convinced that the great majority of Americans share this positive can-do vision. We refuse to be dragged backward into a winner-take-all society where the privileged and the powerful seize even a greater share of the wealth as the middle class struggles and declines. Americans are a tough and resilient and optimistic people. We can and will work together to meet the great challenges of our day. We can and will, indeed we must, restore the middle class as the backbone of a stronger, richer, and fairer America. Mr. President, with that I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Earlier today we had a